going on, guys? It's Nick here, back in the video. Today we're going over 5 quarterbacks that I think have a pretty wide range of outcomes this season, and we'll talk about how much I like them at their ADP. First up, we'll talk about Kyler Murray. Kyler comes off the board right now at pick 85. That's the first pick in round 8 of a 12-team league, and my rankings have him 81st overall. That is the 709. Since his rookie season, Kyler's been the quarterback 12, 6, 4, 7, 10, and 12 in points per game, which is obviously really strong output, but it's also not like he's been free in drafts, right? He hasn't been the 20th quarterback off boards most years. So for the most part in a lot of seasons, and a big reason as to why people are always, I guess, somewhat hesitant with Kyler is that he has mostly either return value or honestly slightly underperformed value given where you had to draft him each season. In the 3 years where he did finish as a top 7 quarterback, he was drafted a little bit earlier than he finished. And that quarterback 10 in points per game finish, that came in a season where he only played 8 games. So the bigger story with Kyler is always the injuries, right? When healthy, he's been awesome in fantasy, but he's missed 18 games as a quarterback the last 4 years. And it hasn't just been like, he tore his ACL in week one season and missed the entire year. It's been like consistent every single year. He's just missing a chunk of time. And again, at quarterback, that's a position usually that has more stability. Of course, in today's video, we're mostly going over players who have been injured in the past. That's what kind of leads to this up and down production at quarterback. But again, that really hurts you at quarterback because you are kind of expecting this to be your player all season. And especially when Kyler specifically, a lot of times when he's been injured, it's been like, halfway through the year. And then we do see a dip in his production. Like if he hurts his ankle, hurts his shoulder halfway through the year, when he comes back, he looks less mobile. He's throwing the ball a little worse when he's returning from injury. My biggest concern with him this season is the rushing. It's a little weird to see rushing attempts per game every single season since 2020 dropping. Starts at 8.3 per game, which is awesome. You're like, let's go. That's hyper mobility. Down to 6.3 after that, 6.1, 5.5, and then 4.6 rush attempts per game last season. That's a little bit concerning since that's a lot of why you're drafting him, right? Is that mobility and that ability to hit 8, right? Because we've seen it in the past. He's had 8 carries per game in a season. Probably not going to expect that this year, but we are expecting more than 4.6 carries per game from Kyler Murray. Here's why I'm optimistic. Number one, he was at least efficient last season. So even though the rush attempts per game, 4.6 last year, wasn't great, the yards per carry went up because when he was running, it was under a more efficient circumstance. And so his yardage actually wasn't that bad. It was around where it has been. So that's not a huge concern. But a big part of the optimism is the Cardinals last season started off very run heavy. We don't want that from a quarterback, right? Through the first 10 weeks, they were an extraordinarily run-heavy team. They were the 3rd most run-heavy team in the league. They had 0 games with a positive pass rate over expectation through week 10. They go into their week 11 bye. They come out, and they completely reverse course. They jump 10% in overall pass rate, and it wasn't just that they were like losing a bunch of games. 11.5% increase in pass rate over expectation. That takes into account game script. They become the 6th most pass-heavy team in the league. They have a positive pass rate over expectation in 6 of their 7 remaining games. If that is a trend they look to continue doing this season, that unlocks a significant ceiling for Kyler Murray. When you just increase dropbacks a ton, of course, that's going to be a good thing for a quarterback because all that can turn into is, of course, a sack. But most of the time, it's going to turn into a rush attempt for the quarterback or a pass attempt. That's a lot better than handing the ball off to one of the running backs. Kyler is also very much an indoor quarterback. In their 6 outdoor games last season, he averaged just 1 passing touchdowns per game. The team only scored 21.5 points per game overall. That jumped to 1.36 passing touchdowns per game. In indoor games, team scored 24.6 points per game indoor. This season, no team plays indoors more than the Cardinals. And if you look at their outdoor games, they've got 2 what should be great weather games, being at San Fran and at Tampa Bay, which only leaves 2 games all season where they might have weather concerns at Seattle and at the Bengals. But that's it. So pretty much every week for the Cardinals, we're expecting them to play in near perfect conditions. And so it's not shocking that Vegas has them projected for only 1 less points per game than the Bengals this season. I also think the team is just going to be a little bit better overall. They invested in the offensive line. We have Marvin Harrison Jr. in year 2, McBride in year 4. Maybe Benson can contribute a little bit on the ground, keep James Conner healthy and fresh. I don't know. I completely understand the people who are scared off because of the injuries. But he did play a full 17 weeks last season and was first by a mile in dropbacks after their week 11 bye. He had 301 dropbacks in the final 7 weeks. That was 15 more than second place. I know this offense fell short of expectations last season, but I'm really, really tempted to pull the trigger in that round 7-8 range, as the 8th quarterback off boards. I think that's a very appropriate cost for him. You've got most of your starters. Maybe you even added in a top 3 tight end by that point, but you've got your starting running backs, you've got your starting wide receivers, again, maybe a top end tight end. This is a really good spot where maybe I want to go after someone who's a little bit more volatile at the quarterback position, but that I can clearly see it. I know we've said that in the past, so I get it if you want to be out on Kyler, but I don't know. I see the upside pretty clearly this season. Ton of dome games. They're projected well in points per game. It is an explosive offense with very talented playmakers. I think this could be the season he puts it all together. And at cost, I think he's just far more likely to help your team than he is to hurt it. Next up, we have Caleb Williams coming off the board at pick 100. That is the early to mid 9th round. And then I have him at pick 97, a little bit before that at the 901. Caleb, obviously, brutal as a rookie. Terrible rookie season. Among 31 qualified quarterbacks, he ranked 27th in completion rate, 28th in yards per attempt. He was sacked at the 2nd highest rate in the league. He was dead last in catchable target percentage. That's not great. Obviously, everyone knows the reason to be optimistic. Shane Waldron's an idiot. Ben Johnson is not. Caleb was put in position to fail last season. Now he'll be set up to succeed. I'd also like to point out that he was below average in turnover-worthy throw rate last season, meaning he did do a really good job of limiting turnover-worthy plays. That's what can get rookie quarterbacks especially into trouble, is that even great quarterbacks, even quarterbacks that end up being phenomenal, it's very difficult transitioning from college to the NFL. Defenses are much, much better. And so they tend to have very high turnover-worthy throw rates. That didn't happen for Caleb, so that is a positive. Also, his adjusted completion percentage, which, accounts for things like drops, spikes, throwaways, just how accurate was he, was a little bit better. It wasn't bottom of the league. So that's nice to see. It's also not shocking that his overall accuracy was a little bit lower, given the fact that no player attempted more deep passes than Caleb Williams, and you're going to be less accurate when you're throwing a ton of deep passes. Ultimately, though, if you do look at some of the underlying data, I don't want to sugarcoat things. It was rough. No matter how you isolate, you want to isolate for only short, intermediate, long. You want to isolate for under pressure, not under pressure. Most of those metrics he does do poor in accuracy-wise. Again, even if you're saying there's no pressure and we're only looking intermediate, it's not great. There was no one area where he really excelled in that we could kind of say, okay, maybe they can capitalize on that this season. So again, it was a bad season. It was a highly inaccurate season. That is obviously not ideal. I think that he makes for a phenomenal pick on a site like Underdog, a site where you can say, okay, I think the Bears do good. This is a build where I think Chicago does well. I think Ben Johnson comes in here. I want to stack up the Bears, right? I want to take DJ Moore early, Rome Odunze. Maybe I want to take Caleb Williams. Maybe I want to also take one of the running backs there. And I want to bet on this offense doing well. In a redraft league, I'm a little bit less excited. I know that the play calling was bad, and I know that that, as I've said in the past, contributes to some of the accuracy problems, because when the plays are bad and when he's breaking down off that first read, if no one's in great position and he's forcing things, you're not going to be as accurate when you're forcing things, when you're off rhythm, when you're finding guys late. So it makes sense that the accuracy was bad, but I would still like to see a little bit more accuracy because he still had great playmakers last season. It's not like Keenan Allen's cooked. I think Keenan Allen's going to play this season. I think he's going to sign somewhere and be, not amazing, but I think he's going to be fine. I think he was totally fine as a wide receiver 3 last season. I think DJ Moore is a great wide receiver. I think Rome Odunze is a great wide receiver. And so it's like he didn't have absolute trash to throw to, right? If you look at someone like Drake May, he had awful wide receivers last season. Like when Demario Douglas is by far your best wide receiver, that's a problem because he'd be the 4th best wide receiver in Chicago last year. So it's not like he didn't have good playmakers. And so it's just a little bit concerning to see that. Also worth noting, the Bears are only projected to score 22.8 points per game this season. That ranks middle of the road. So Vegas is not projecting Ben Johnson to go in there, turn this team around to get like 25 points per game. Probably not going to happen. I'm not going to say that it can't happen because it absolutely can't. He's a great quarterback. They've got good playmakers. And if they really turn it around, sure, I guess that could occur. But on average, they're probably going to be in that 22 to 23 points per game range. They also only get 3 dome games all season. Not ideal. And it's also not great late in the year. So obviously, Chicago. Do you want to be playing in Chicago in late November, late December when the matchups matter the most to us in fantasy? Not really. And from week 12 on, they play in Chicago, Philly, Green Bay, Chicago, and then finally at San Fran championship weekend. That'll be a good one. But all those 5 in a row leading up to that, those have the potential to be very, very bad weather games. I can promise you, at minimum, 2 of those are going to be spots where we're like, oh my goodness, are we even playing Caleb Williams? That's not what I want to be feeling when I'm, potentially need to win to get into the playoff or be in the fantasy playoffs. That's not ideal. And for how early you're drafting him, you probably want to feel locked in late in the season. So personally, I would prefer to gain exposure to the Bears because I want exposure to the Bears this season. I would prefer to do so through their playmakers. Grab DJ Moore, grab Rome Odunze, take a shot on Loveland, take a shot on DeAndre Swift, take a shot on Roschon if you really want him. I don't, but take a shot on some of these pass catchers. I don't know that we need to do it through Caleb Williams. I like the ceiling, but I think a lot of it is theoretical if things really break his way. And if a lot of things break his way, there are a lot of really high upside quarterbacks going a little bit before him and a little bit after him. So I think on average, he's probably slightly more likely to hurt your team than he is to help it. Another quarterback with a wide range of outcomes this season is Justin Fields. Obviously, Justin Fields has a wide range of outcomes. He's coming off the board 107 overall. That is the second to last pick in round 9. I have him 106 overall. That is the third to last pick in round 9. The main draw with Fields is obviously the mobility, right? He ran the ball a little bit less last season. I think that was kind of a closed-off system. I don't think we want to look too much into last season. They game planned for Russell Wilson. They really, really limited what Fields could do. So I would say if you're looking at what do you think from Fields, I don't want to say throw away last season because it's the last thing we have. It's our last data point. You have to account for it. But I think he's much more likely to be the Fields that we saw in Chicago than he is the Fields we saw in Pittsburgh. But over his career, he's averaged 8.4 rush attempts per game, 6 yards per carry on those rush attempts. That's 50 rushing yards per game. And when you throw in 19 rushing touchdowns across 44 starts, that's 7.6 rushing fantasy points per game. So even if he attempted 0 passes, or I guess completed 0 passes in a game, you should expect around 7.5 fantasy points per game on rushing alone. In general, we're going to reference this for the last 3 players. 20 points per game is kind of what you're looking at quarterback to be someone who really separates from the pack. At 19, if Justin Fields had 19 points per game this season, that is totally fine, right? That's going to exceed value. That's going to be someone you like drafting. But in terms of who could you draft and then be a league winner, be someone that's okay, I'm starting this guy every week and I'm really, really capitalizing on his production. I'm benefiting over 70% of the teams in this league. I have an edge at quarterback. It's 20. That's kind of the benchmark you should be looking for at quarterback. So working backwards from there, we're hoping Fields can get 12.5 passing fantasy points per game. Right now, if you look at his props on DraftKings, passing over under is 2,550 passing yards, 14.5 passing touchdowns. If we assume 15 starts, which I think is probably what they're baking in here, he's the locked in starter, but you kind of have to add in injuries. Maybe they're looking at 14, but I'm going to say 15 starts. That's about 170 passing yards per game, 1 passing touchdown per game. That is 10.8 passing fantasy points per game. So, if we kind of look at those rough numbers, doesn't hit it, but I think that does a good job of displaying that, like, it's in the range of outcomes. As an average outcome, he falls short of really hitting that 20, but you also shouldn't be expecting the 20 for exactly where you're drafting him. So I think roughly on average, you should probably expect on a per game basis, low-end quarterback one numbers from Justin Fields, and that he will slightly outperform his ADP. But if we run into a season where he gets up to like 200 passing yards per game, maybe he throws for closer to 20 touchdowns than he does 14 or 15, you're going to have like a mid to high end quarterback 1 in points per game on your hands. Personally, I think the path to that is a little bit thin. I don't expect 200 passing yards per game from Fields. I don't expect 20 passing touchdowns from Justin Fields. Maybe if he does play a fully healthy 17 weeks, he ends on the high end of variance in passing, has a couple explosive plays, gets some 70, 80-yard plays in there, then maybe. But this is going to be a very, very, very run-heavy offense. They're going to utilize all 3 running backs. Like, all 3 running backs will have a strong role in this team, plus obviously Justin Fields is going to run the ball a ton. So their rushing play rate is going to be insane. I probably need to bake it in to be higher than what I have right now in the projections. There's going to be plenty of games where we're like late in the fourth quarter and Justin Fields barely has like 100 passing yards. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but he's going to be hovering around like 150 passing yards a lot of the time. And given how few weapons they have outside of Garrett Wilson, do we really think that he's going to have a spike season for passing touchdowns? Because when they get in the red zone, they're going to run it with Fields, which I have baked in. I have him with plenty of rushing touchdowns. They're going to run the ball with Hall and Allen and Davis. Like, they're going to run the ball a lot with these running backs. They're not really going to be dropping back a ton. So I don't think they're going to spike up to 20 plus passing touchdowns. I think he's a completely fine pick in both Underdog and in Redraft. And honestly, I think I need to get more Wilson Field stacks on Underdog, just because like the correlation there is obvious, right? If Garrett Wilson has games, which he's going to have, where he's got like 120, 130 yards and a touchdown, for a fact Justin Fields is having a good game, because that's locking in a ton of passing yards and a touchdown right away. He's going to have rushing yards. That when they're actually needing to drop back a lot and throw it because they're down a lot, like, that's really going to benefit both of them. Like, I think the correlation is insane between these two, that I would really want to be getting some stacks there. So when you draft Garrett Wilson Underdog, I would be looking to stack him with Justin Fields. I just don't know that in a redraft league, Fields is going to be a league winner when you consider after Wilson, unless they trade for someone, which would really help him. After Wilson, I mean, it's Alan Lazard, Josh Reynolds, Malachi Corley, who's purely just like a screen pass player, Mason Taylor, Jeremy Rucker. Like, it's not looking good behind Garrett Wilson. So Garrett Wilson's going to have a ton of targets. I mean, he could see 180 targets this season. I just feel like they probably need to trade for someone to, for Fields to truly hit his like 90th percentile season. So again, I think he's a totally fine pick. He's someone that I'm not like aggressively going after. I think I have him right at his ADP. If he falls past his ADP, because I pretty much always want to draft a quarterback if they fall past their ADP, I'm totally fine doing that. I'm just slightly hesitant because I know for a fact the passing volume is going to be very, very, very low, a lot lower than a lot of people are assuming this season. Also, if you are worried about injuries, if you're someone who's like, can't draft Kyler because of the injuries, can't draft Tua, who we'll get to last, because of the injuries, like, you got to be consistent, right? That means you can't draft Justin Fields because of the injuries. Because my goodness, if you're going to say that you're worried about injuries, he's 0 for 4, staying healthy in his career. You cannot say that you care about injuries and then completely overlook them with Justin Fields. If you are assuming he's a starting quarterback, he is probably going to miss multiple weeks due to injury. So that is also a concern baked in here. Again, everyone we talk about in this video is going to have injury concerns. So bake it in with Fields. But I think, I like drafting him. I see the upside. I don't know that it's going to be league winning. Next up, we've got Dak Prescott, currently being drafted 108th overall. That is the last pick in round 9. I have him 103rd overall, which is the middle of the 9th round. Over the last 4 years, Dak, quarterback, 8, 14, 4, and then 24 in points per game last season. Last season, obviously an anomaly, obviously also just kind of like a small sample size stat. One of those 8 games he played, he left early due to injury. Another one he left early because the Lions absolutely embarrassed them, a game I was actually at, and that was embarrassing for the Cowboys. Other 6 games, he averaged 278 passing yards per game. That would be top 3 in any season. And it's kind of the same thing in 2022 when he finished 14th in points per game. That was counting the game he gets injured. When he comes back in week 7 after the injury, he was the quarterback 6 from that point on. So typically, you're getting mid-range quarterback 1 numbers when healthy from Dak Prescott, and that shouldn't be any different this season. CeeDee Lamb is obviously an incredible wide receiver, but Pickens, I mean, the initial reports out of camp have been phenomenal with him. He's looking great. The chemistry is really good. I think he's going to be a phenomenal wide receiver 2 for this team. Going to really force defenses to not sell out to stop CeeDee Lamb, which they were able to do effectively last season. Not from the perspective of like CeeDee Lamb, was shut down or anything, but from an offensive perspective. If you were looking at the Cowboys offense being what is wrong last season, it was that they had one good player on offense and they had to force everything to him. And that's easy to stop as a defense. So even though CeeDee Lamb is able to rack up, a bunch of receptions, get a bunch of yardage, as an offense, that's going to hold you back and make you less efficient. When you add in that second playmaker, now they're like, okay, we need safety help because Pickens is phenomenal deep downfield. We have another person in the red zone we really have to worry about. And we have another player who can easily beat man coverage on the outside. So we can't shift everything to the other side because now we're going to get destroyed by Pickens. And so when you add that in, you have Jake Ferguson fully healthy. Like, this offense can finally get going. Maybe one of the running backs can step up. I think it just gives them another option downfield, another option in the red zone, a team that is going to lean very pass heavy. I just think there's a lot of positive trends for Dak Prescott. Now, I do think we should expect to see slightly reduced mobility coming off the hamstring injury. But let's be honest, he's averaged like 15 rushing yards per game in his career. So let's say he reduces half, which is probably way, way, way too much. That's like half a point per game. Like it's not actually doing anything if he's a little bit less mobile. All he has to do is run the ball like 2 times per game to kind of hit his average, maybe 3 times per game. And that's just going to be a random scramble. I just don't think that, like, even if you say he has reduced mobility, he wasn't getting any of his production on the ground anyways. So that's not impacting things, right? If Lamar Jackson had 50% reduced mobility, we'd be like, oh no, that's a big problem. Not a guy who's running the ball 15 yards per game. If that drops down to like 10, it is not that big of an issue because he's just going to throw the ball there. And again, you see a slight reduction, but it's not going to be that drastic. You are drafting Dak for the passing yards. You're drafting him for the passing touchdowns. He currently has the 2nd best odds in the league to lead the league in passing yards. So that's a positive. At the end of the day, another player I think I'd lean into a little bit more on a site like Underdog where we have that correlation. All of his production is passing, right? So I know where it's going. If Dak Prescott's throwing the ball for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, I know where that production is going. It is going to Pickens, it is going to Lamb, it is going to Ferguson. Probably one of them is having a huge day, but we know that that production is going to be there because he's only going to run for like 10 to 15 yards per game. In a redraft league, it does cap the upside a little bit. It's why I don't like the ceiling as much for Dak. Again, a great chance of finishing as like a mid-range quarterback 1 and a great chance to be around that like 18 to 20 points per game range. But in terms of like really eclipsing that, it's relatively unlikely because if the mobility is going to be reduced and it already wasn't there, he needs a phenomenal season passing to really pay off. And when that's the case, it just introduces more floor outcomes than it does paths to top 5 seasons. So for me, ceiling wise, I don't think he can compete with someone like Kyler Murray. And I'm not sure he can compete with someone like Justin Fields in terms of their true 90th percentile ceilings. I think he's much more likely to exceed ADP and be a really solid pick. And I like the correlation on Underdog because he also falls pretty far on Underdog and definitely goes later than the quarterbacks we talked about so far. But in terms of redraft league, I think he's more of a safe pick, more someone who's probably not going to finish top 5 in production. Last quarterback we'll go over today, before we circle kind of back and go over things one more time, is Tua, being drafted 137th overall, this mid-12th round. I have him 156th overall. So that ranking should probably tell you something, especially with, how I'm projecting the Dolphins this season. I think Achane is priced appropriately. I think Tyreek has significant upside in round 3. Waddle's a great pick in round 6. I think if Jonnu stays, he's going to be a pretty solid pick in that general round 9 to 10 range, although he would definitely be my least favorite among this grouping. So I'm in on this offense. I'm projecting them well. I like these guys, but I can't get on board with Tua outside of an underdog stack. Because again, on underdog, it makes a ton of sense. With very, very high certainty that if Tua is hitting 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, which is what you need for him to have a good game on underdog, Tyreek, Waddle, they're probably having very good games. And so you correlate that beautifully. In a redraft league, I just don't see it. Like, he quite literally, I feel like everyone forgets this when they bash on Tua, he led the NFL in passing yards in 2023. He was 21st in points per game. And since then, it's even less likely that he's going to be mobile. Like, even more likely he has literally 0 rushing yards with his legs. It just introduces no ceiling. Over the last 3 seasons, he has averaged 0.5 rushing fantasy points per game. For him to hit 20 points per game, he'd need like 5,500 passing yards. That's just not going to happen. So really like the offense. I wanted to bring him up because I really like the offense. And so I think a lot of people look at that and be like, oh man, he really likes Tyreek. He likes Waddle. He likes stacking this team. Achane sees explosiveness, sees how high this team could really get in terms of yardage. He must really like Tua late. No production on the ground. Obviously, we have the risk of concussions, even where he's going by ADP. Mathematically, it just does not make sense to draft him. So let's wrap this up. Kyler, Dak, Fields, Caleb, Tua. I think Kyler deserves to be at the top of that list there. He has the ability, we don't know 100% it's going to happen, but he absolutely has the ability to have an elite season rushing. And I have the hope that this offense is going to take a step forward this season, that the passing will be elevated like we saw to end last season, and that he has a really strong chance of having a top 5 season in fantasy. I think Dak and Fields are priced appropriately. I think they're solid values in drafts. I think they're both clearly capable of having elite seasons, but I do think the path for each of them getting there is just a little bit more thin than it is for Kyler. And so they're a little bit more likely to exceed value, but not be league winners. And if it came down to it, I do like the path for Fields having that league winning season a little bit better than Dak, just because of the mobility aspect. Caleb comes in after that because I think the ceiling is a lot more theoretical and there's a lot more hype driving that ADP, a lot more, he's got these great playmakers, so they'll be better. He'll be better as a player. The play calling will be better. It's all these things we're hoping will be better, and they probably will be better, but if any of them are not, and maybe he just doesn't develop as quickly, there's a lot of different things that all need to be there for him to truly hit the high end of those range of outcomes, that I think hype is probably going to drive his ADP higher than it should. Still a totally fine pick and good in stacks, but a little bit less likely than those other guys to truly have a league-winning season. And then Tua needs to be strictly an underdog play because the ceiling is almost impossible to hit. On a week-to-week basis, it can be fine, but especially the floor. I mean, when they get up quickly because of the running back scoring, there's going to be weeks where he doesn't even have a touchdown. He's 200 passing yards, and you're why on earth did they even start Tua? All right. If you watched this far, be sure to leave a like. Really helps me out. And if you want to see where I have every single player ranked this season, you can do that on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That'll do it for this one, though. I'll see you all on Monday for another episode of Mock Draft Monday.